Hi everyone, today we did get a pretty dramatic pullback back to these 560 levels, down quite a lot on the day. You can see that first candle was pretty much all the losses, but we did fall a little bit here pre-market. First candle of the open, big sells right to the level 560, which actually held up really well during the session. Tons and tons of tests at that level. So far, not terrible. But again, a little bit more aggressive of a pullback than I would have guessed. Let's take a look at the charts as we head into the FOMC tomorrow. Do me a quick favor and like and subscribe and watch the video till the end to help out the channel, and let's get started. So in news today, we got NVIDIA announcing their Blackwell Ultra and Rubin AI chips. They continue to come out with the next generation of chips. These are expected to ship in 2026, so a new generation, continuing this flow of AI chips into the markets. Not a huge impact. We kind of expected the next generation. That is what we got. Of course, markets are waiting to see what the actual demand is for these chips off of the back of things like DeepSeek and the potential for stronger AI capabilities out of less powerful chips and maybe potentially slowing demand for these highest margin chips. But we haven't seen that quite yet, and so far this is keeping the value in these companies. Of course, you got Microsoft, Google, Amazon continuing to buy these in the tens of billions every single year, every single quarter, continuing to buy huge amounts of these chips. And of course, NVIDIA is benefiting from all of that. Moving over to fear and greed, we finished at a 20. This says we were at a 22 yesterday, but I think this was actually a 20 yesterday, so we should have flatlined, maybe a slight step down there. Still extreme fear, again, across pretty much all of the metrics. Momentum, extreme fear, strength, extreme fear, breadth, everything here is still in extreme fear. Volatility stepping back up off of that trend line. That's very concerning. We'll take a look at that on the VIX charts. Safe haven demand at the bottom of this range, but continuing to look very weak. This should start to level out as we kind of get out of that 20-day window. That'll be interesting to see how that adjusts. And then you can see junk bonds actually neutralizing here a little bit, starting to elevate just a little bit more. Moving over to the economic calendar, you can see today we did get the Atlanta Fed GDP, which was a little bit better than expectations. That was really the only thing that I cared about here today, and that was good. 20-year bond auction coming in a little bit lower as well. Markets seem to be thinking a cut might be coming here, so yields have come down a little bit. Tomorrow, obviously, we have FOMC, all the interest rate projections. That's going to be interesting. And then for Thursday, you got Philly Fed, 10-year tips, and existing home sales. Moving over to the charts, starting off with the S&Ps here on the daily chart, you can see we had this kind of downtrending action. We're still in here right at that 560 level. After hours down just a few pennies, but we pulled back after getting above the 9 EMA, almost retested the 200 SMA and then pulled back. Higher low setup, potentially. Momentum still okay. RSI needs to hold that on the daily chart. So far, so good on that. And here on the hourly chart, looks pretty good as well. Again, the level is 560.07. We tested that level a couple of times. We closed above it. Want to see that continue to hold and drive up to that 569.90 area. The S&Ps seem to be doing better here than the NASDAQ charts. You can see pretty solid higher low setup at a key level. But let's go ahead and take a look at the Tasty charts. Looking at the SPY charts here on the 4-hour, you can see we did pull back to that kind of midpoint here. The midpoint is 559.81. Pulled back to the midpoint, ended up holding that. We're also back below the 8 EMA. So is it going to hold here? Are we going to get that slight continuation? We rejected off of the trailing stop at 567.83. Now we're at the midpoint waiting to see what happens at that key level. And then looking here at the hourly chart, you can see we hit that lowest ATR band, big volume coming through at the end of the session, kind of a mid chop here. Want to see it hold, but we're back into bearish conditions. This is a deeper pullback than I would have wanted to see. We knew it was a possibility. Wanted to see some structure in here hold potentially. Somewhere in here around that 34 EMA would have been nice, around 563, but didn't play out that way. It cut through all of those levels, and it does look a lot more bearish here as we head into the FOMC day tomorrow. Moving over to the NASDAQ, similar thesis, but even worse, down 1.7% back into the middle of this range. I did move my level here. I had this around 471.50, 471.70, but I moved it up to 472.50. That seems to be a more important level. You can see we held it there on the 10th, retested that zone here Tuesday, Wednesday last week, and now we're back here again Tuesday this week. So that's a critical level. We did touch it here today. That was pretty much the low of day. I think this is a critical zone. So far, that's kind of where we're at. We're in the middle of the range, so no clear direction. If we pull back and hold, that would be great. But for now, We have a broken level here at 477. This was honestly a bearish trade. I should have been out of all of my positions way sooner in the session, and I just wasn't. I traded quite poorly here today, which is super frustrating. But for now, this is where we're at, kind of in no man's land, waiting to see if this zone holds, and then we push through here. Or if we rally back to this zone, reject, and then push back to 472. Makes sense that we got basically no movement after the open as we head into FOMC day, but this initial sell was far more dramatic than I thought, right? We closed above this 481 level. I was hoping to see that kind of hold. I thought maybe we went to 477, hold support in here and consolidate and maybe get a retracement, but none of those things happened. We ended up breaking all the way back down to this new level, and now that's where we're at. If this holds, again, we're okay, but if it breaks down, we could absolutely head back to those lower lows at 468.05. Moving over to the Tasty charts here for the Qs, you can see we did not get as high as we wanted. We came off of that 55 EMA and immediately fell through the floor, breaking all those levels here on the 4 hour. We were hoping for a push here to the 488.20 area potentially, and then we ended up getting a step down on the trailing stop 486.92, so still very much bearish conditions on the 4 hour chart. And then looking at that hourly, we fell all the way to that lowest ATR band. We ended up holding there. We didn't fall all the way to it in the after hours or at the end of the session, so maybe there's a little something there, but still well below that 8 EMA that continues to act as resistance through the session. Trailing stop right now on the hourly 479.66. Moving over to the Russell and the Dow, these actually held up a lot better here. You can see the Russell was down only 1%. Tech was leading the down move here today, and the Russell is far less susceptible to that. We didn't break this next level at 201.88. We did get below 205. We kind of expected that. Expected somewhat of a pullback, but mid-range here, we're holding the zone. 201.88 is the level. Overall, not super worried about this as long as this can hold in here. Dow moved right to the level for 18.38 and then sold almost to the trend line, closed in the middle of the candle. Momentum still okay. RSI still okay. Again, looks a little bit better than the NASDAQ. I think the NASDAQ honestly looks like the worst of the group. Moving over to the Mag 7. Mag 7 was absolutely terrible. 2.73% to the downside. Continues to sell off. New low close, tested the 265 level. We didn't touch that yet, but we hit it here today. Momentum didn't step down, but I think that it will at this point. RSI just barely above the SMA. If it's going to hold, it needs to do it here. Overall, though, pretty bad. After hours down just a little bit. Nothing doing here on big tech. We're through this consolidation low at 273. We're right at this kind of consolidation high, if you could call it that. Realistically, I think this is probably going down to the 250 to 249 area somewhere in here. Makes sense to me. And if this goes, that is going to take markets with it. The Mag 7 continues to look not so great. Moving over to Apple and Microsoft. Apple down 0.61, so Apple held up okay. Microsoft down 1.33. These are some of the better performers in the Mag 7, and they were still down quite a bit. 211.55 is the support. The low was 211.49. So we touched the support and held it for now. We'll see if that can continue to hold. This looks like a test, bounce, retest. Can it continue from here? And then looking at Microsoft, tested that level 388. Gapped below it here this morning and then almost fell to support. I think it's probably going to go to support before we see any kind of movement up. So 378.77 is the level for now. Moving over to Tesla and NVIDIA. These were the worst performers here. Absolutely terrible. In the Mag 7, you can see Tesla down 5.3%. Absolutely awful. Almost back to the lows here from Monday last week. Support is now 214, right at this kind of consolidation low from October of 24. Again, looks bad. I think it can continue to go here, at least to 214. Realistically, it could potentially go lower. It is bouncing a smidgen after hours, but I don't love it. And then looking at NVIDIA here, you can see below 116.70, close below the level. The 9 EMA is your support there at 114.11. Can that hold momentum? It's hanging in there okay. Want to see this hold in here. Right now, it looks like a left shoulder head, maybe forming that right shoulder here. That would be interesting. But if we do get this kind of continuation on this trend structure, that's going to be awful, right? So you have a low, lower low with a high, lower high setting up. And if this falls through here down to that 95 area, that is going to be pretty catastrophic for markets. NVIDIA not holding up on the back of their investor news and the announcement of their new chips. Moving over to Amazon and Google. Google announced that they are buying another cloud company. This was a deal that they tried to do before and it ended up falling through. And on the back of that, they are down 2.3%, fell to the level here, 161.59, overthrew that quite a lot, down to 158.90, just below that 159 area. Right now, your next zone, I probably should add a level in here, somewhere around 156. You can see that consolidation back here. April of 24 consolidation low in here, gapped through that area as we came through, but for me, 150 looks like the better level. Key pivot point back here in September. And if this breaks, I think there's a fair amount of potential for that to go through. Just want to see the volume profile here. You can see not a ton of volume, right? So you got a nice volume here. And then zooming out, you can see you have a pretty solid amount of volume here. But in here, not so much, right? So you could cut through here, maybe go as low as 143. Looking at this volume profile makes sense to me to go to that level. Either way, investors didn't like this, continued selling on Google, not great. And then you got Amazon gap down and hold at the level 191.64 held on a closing basis. It's still down 1.5%, so not great. And this is a new low close relative to everything else in this latest consolidation. So again, Mag 7 doesn't look great, needs to show some strength and some leadership if we are going to see higher markets. Moving over to staples and discretionaries, we got a little bit of an everything sell. So again, not a great indicator there. Down 1.14 for staples and 1.78 here for discretionaries, back below the 193.81 level on discretionaries. Momentum didn't go with it. Momentum on the staples did, however. We almost engulfed that really powerful candle yesterday. Not what I expected. I wanted to see some continuation into here, but so far, not so good on that, and everything seemed to be selling pretty aggressively here today, and neither of these look super great, but if I had to pick one, I still think staples is the better structure with this kind of consolidative low versus discretionaries. This looks like a slight hesitation and a potential continuation lower. Moving over to Breadth started a little bit more selling here today after two really powerful days. We hit the key level at the 21 on 20 day and we sold from there. We're just below the 36 level. We're right at the trend. The trend needs to hold. If it cuts through there, that's going to be catastrophic, in my opinion. And then looking at 50 day, right to the trend, still holding that trend. Momentum still okay, RSI still okay, but structurally I wanted to see some continuation into these zones here, and we just didn't get that. And honestly, for me, this is a little bit of an early sell. 20 day makes sense. 50 day, if it stalls out here, that's not going to be good. Realistically, you wanted to see it push to here if we were going to start to show at least a little bit of strength. And for me, it just didn't. Moving over to the dollar continued its selling to a new relative low on a closing basis. We're right at the low from Tuesday, but we closed at it, which is not great. It's not quite closed. You got about 30 minutes, but it doesn't seem to be moving a whole lot. It's right in this zone, well below that 103 level, looking for 102.9. At this point, we're below this structure here, looking for this to continue lower. The dollar has been pulling back really powerfully. You had a really strong rally here, not so much here. Waiting to see if it's going to base in this area. 102.9 is my level. You can see important area here. Came back into this zone, consolidated in January of 24, touched it back here in November of 23. So it's been an important level. Is that the zone where we start to find a little bit of support? So far, we haven't touched it yet, but I think that's where we're going in the short term. Moving over to JNK and TLT, both of these continuing to hold up really, really well. JNK down only 0.18 or 17 cents on the day, still in this zone here. Need to extend that out right in the same consolidation. TLT positive on the day, just 9 cents, but still holding up. Did kind of test this area, did go a little bit lower early, but then held up pretty good. Want to see this continue higher, and I think it's set up for a good FOMC. So TLT should find strength, which means potentially some forecasting of a cut, in my opinion. Moving over to volatility, not so good here. This was the zone we said could hold, and it did. It continued higher here today. Momentum still bearish, but it held the trend support, which for me means this should be going into this zone here around 25.50, maybe as high as 28.29. That was the previous peak. If we get a low, higher low here, and we end up getting a high, slightly higher high in there, that's going to be not so good for markets. So Watching this zone closely, want to see it continue to the downside, and this would be just a short hesitation, but if it ends up holding as support, that's going to be bearish for markets. Moving over to my accounts, I traded poorly. I did not follow my rules. I did end up leaving on the Russell here, so I did roll that out for tomorrow at 203 for $1.60. That did fine, but in the Qs, I just could not follow my rules for some reason today. I didn't, and that was super frustrating. I gave back a ton of gains that I had for the year, so I'm more in line with markets, down just slightly on the year, still outperforming markets generally, but not at all what I wanted. I was doing pretty well, and that's frustrating deep into March to do this poorly, but here we are. This is what we're doing. Going to try to do a little better tomorrow. Let me know down in the comments section what you think of Blackwell Ultra and the NVIDIA event. Is it going to be able to stabilize this stock, which continues to sell? Is the Mag 7 going to pull down markets? Let me know. Otherwise, like and subscribe. If you got any value out of this video, make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Of course, none of this is financial advice. This is all for entertainment purposes. Good luck in your trading and have a great day.